digitaljamsessions.com.
Hello and welcome to this Digital Jam session. Today we are joined once again by Jeff Gomez from Starlight Runner. We have with us again Sarah from Coventry University. Paul is back from Legion M, and we have a newcomer in the form of Jeremy Dalton from PwC. Welcome everybody.
Hi.
It's Anya.
Hello. Why don't you explain for us very briefly what exactly it is you do in slightly more detail? I'm going to start with you, Jeremy, just because you are new to this mix and our listeners haven't met you before. Explain to us exactly, first of all, for those of them who don't know what PwC is, what it is, and then what exactly you do at PwC.
Sure. So PwC, most people will have heard of from an accountancy or taxation point of view. That's generally what we're famous for. But believe it or not, we do actually have a technology consulting department, and one that does innovation work for clients. And that's where I sit. So I'm an innovation consultant in PwC's emerging and digital tech team. And I have a specific focus on virtual reality and augmented reality. So what that means is I talk to clients about all the emerging tech that is going to hit them and disrupt their business and industry, but particularly focusing on virtual reality and augmented reality and what that means for them.
Okay, and I think it's worth noting and explaining as well just how dedicated you are to your job, Jeremy, because I feel that the audience needs to know that you drilled a hole in your living room wall so that you could get your wiring through for your HTC Vive.
So this is true.
I just felt it was really important. They need to know how dedicated you are.
This outside of my day job, I do actually believe in virtual reality and augmented reality so much that I did, in fact, drill a hole between my bedroom and living room so that I could power my HTC Vive from my computer in my bedroom, but actually use the space in the living room because there is none in the bedroom, I can assure you. There's too many gadgets.
And
Jeremy, this is Paul. I'm glad you clarified because I was kind of hoping that there may be a virtual reality way for me to experience my tax filings. I guess that's not there yet.
We're looking at it. We're looking at it, Paul. Don't worry. Coming soon.
Yes.
Watch the space.
Okay, it needs to be experienced in that
the Matrix style accounting system. It'll be brilliant. You step into the Matrix. But Paul,
absolutely.
Why don't you explain to us about Legion M and what you're up to with Legion M?
Sure. So Legion M is a new company this year. So just back in March, we launched it, and we describe ourselves as world's first fan-owned entertainment company. So we're based out of California in the U.S., and our government has finally updated some of the antiquated security laws here in the U.S. that allow us, for the first time ever, to go out and allow fans to fund and own a piece of a studio alongside of us and all the Hollywood producers and talent that we're bringing to the table to create content. And we're looking at transmedia content. We ultimately want to have a slate of movies and TV shows. One of our first projects is a virtual reality series that we call Icons. And I can get into more of that later, but they call these new securities laws the Jobs Act. It was an act of Congress, and it was designed to allow what they call equity crowdfunding. And we are the number one equity crowdfunding company in the U.S. I'm proud to share. We completely blew out our first round, and we're in the process of opening another round. Our long-term goal, our aspirational goal, is to have 1 million fans as shareholders. And if the averages stick, we would have capitalized the company with $450 million to fund content that has 1 million people excited about that content. Just to be clear, we go out of our way to make sure that the people that are investing and joining our Legion are actually fans. We don't want Wall Street investors. We don't want venture capital. We want true fans, people that want to be a part of a community that can make a difference. We think of Legion M as more than just a company. It's a movement, and it's a community. And like I said, we just launched it this year, but it's exceeding our expectations on all levels.
So here's the thing. I will say that the community is absolutely the key word here when it comes to Legion M. And for those of our lovely listeners who are going to be popping along to things like Comic Con, you should definitely look out for Legion M t-shirts because you will find quite a lot of them, bopping around in places like Comic Cons and various, film premieres and wherever else they might pop up, because it really is a lifestyle choice for these people who are, investing in the studio of Legion M. And I think that's one of the most interesting things about what Legion M is doing, is that it really is not just about fandom, it is about community, it's about a lifestyle choice. But I'm going to move on now. I'm going to ask you, Sarah, to explain more about what you are doing at Coventry University. Tell us all about your smells.
My smells. It always is, it's really difficult when people start with, tell me about your smells. You never quite know what to say. But yeah, I work at Coventry University, and I'm deputy head of a school of media and performing arts, but my background is in television news and immersive storytelling. So I came to VR a couple of years back as a way to get closer into stories and to really tell them in a full immersive way. One thing I'm really interested in, I do a lot of research around, is how you can be someone else in a virtual world and not just be somewhere else. Taking that technology one step further with kind of virtual embodiment, digital embodiment, all that kind of thing. So that's really cool. But then I have to explain the smells, which has come from making a film recently where I didn't get that feeling of being there or being someone in that virtual space because it was too clean and it just didn't have enough of the atmosphere there. And the film, although we directed it in a way that we could get that sense of chaos and confusion of being in that environment, it needed more, and it needed really dirty smells. So that's what I've been doing for the last few weeks, is making smells, and we're testing it next Friday.
I'm not visiting your office, it's not happening.
So next week I'm going to have a queue of people going inside a really smelly tent that's also really hot, because that's the other sense that I needed to kind of capture watching a film, to see whether they get more presence and more virtual embodiment by being in an immersive environment that's also really stinky and hot. So I will let you know after next week.
Okay, well, hopefully, as long as you're doing it with a good cause in mind, and it's, if I recall rightly, your film is to do with being in kind of, with street vendors and lots of, people cooking food in the street, which isn't so bad. But if anybody from the Dark Shadows teams decides to do smell-o-vision, I am never setting foot inside that experience. I have to say that. So, for those who don't know what Dark Shadows is, it's basically you have to sit in the coffin first before you put the headset on, and then you experience various things to do with death. So I'm just saying, don't want to smell that.
Yeah, but mine's
is that Dark Corner or Dark Shadows?
Oh, it could be Dark Corner or Dark Shadows.
Yeah,
I might have Dark something.
Yeah. Our partner.
But mine's a bit nicer than that. It's not so bad. There's one nice smell and two really dirty smells, but it's all part of the experience.
Just not sure I need to experience the Dark Corners thing. But
No.
Jeff, why don't you tell us all about what you're up to at Starlight Runner?
Oh, hey, I'm Jeff Gomez. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Starlight Runner Entertainment. We're a production studio based in New York, and we specialize in taking big entertainment and brand properties and developing their narratives across multiple media platforms. We do this technique called transmedia storytelling, which helps to build these story worlds so that they can roll out and surround you and immerse you in concert. We've worked on Pirates of the Caribbean, Avatar, Men in Black, Spider-Man, Halo, Coca-Cola, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so I wanted to talk today about the future of connected play and this evolution of the way that we see how we consume entertainment, how we consume different forms of media. And this was really inspired by some of the conversations that I've been having lately with companies who are really looking at utilizing this idea of cross-product play. And I know that, Jeff, this is something you've had a lot of experience with, but this idea of interconnecting things like comics and trading cards with the actual movies or the games, and seeing these things have direct impact. So this whole category of toys to life, for example, with things like Skylanders or Disney Infinity, just talking about the evolution of how we see these things playing out as new and emerging technologies during the market, things like VR, things like AR, what do we see that next step being in terms of how do we make this more than just a momentary game that we play in our, VR HMD or, our VR headset or our mobile phone when we're playing with an AR game? How do we make it something more than just that momentary experience? And I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this, Jeff.
It's an exciting time. We are seeing more and more often these story worlds are emerging from the entertainment industry, and they're playing to different media platforms in different ways, instead of just repeating themselves over and over again the way they did when we were younger, where you watched the movie, then you read the novel of the movie, and then you played the game, which was kind of a crappy version of the movie. Now we're getting to go see Star Wars and playing a video game that's set in the Star Wars universe, but says something different about that universe. Or reading comic books where Han Solo was married, and that's official. That's something that actually happened. Or reading the novels and understanding what happened between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens, and it's all official. This is transmedia storytelling, and it's really helped to drive revenue, but also awareness, keeping these franchises alive in the popular culture between the tent poles of major motion pictures. And of course, now we're seeing efforts to roll this out and launch the intellectual property through an individual media platform like Angry Birds, launched as a game app and then became a pretty successful feature film. Skylanders is the latest to come out entirely original, but leverage a kind of hybrid between the video game platform and physical toys.
Absolutely. And we're seeing more and more game properties and game studios moving into the film space, with people like Blizzard moving into the space as well with their World of Warcraft movies. But Jeremy, I'm curious to hear from you, from your perspective. When we look at this approach of transmedia and the fact that it's perhaps becoming a little bit more, I'm not going to say accepted because it's been around for an awfully long time, but certainly more recognized as a standard part of the mix when it comes to opportunities and lines of revenue. I'm curious from your perspective how you see new and emergent platforms such as VR adding into the mix of this holistic franchise approach. Do you think that this is something that's becoming a little bit more mainstream?
Well, I think I have to admit, personally, I had heard of Skylanders, but I hadn't heard of the term transmedia before. But judging from what you've said, I can understand the main concept there. From what Jeff is saying, it seems to be a very effective way to elongate a brand or a sub-brand, a movie, a game, whatever it is, and ensure that the public, it continues to stay in the public eye and therefore generates greater and greater revenues for companies over a longer and longer period of time. And ultimately, I can see that being the future. I can't imagine that going away anytime soon. I would imagine it would only grow.
And do you think that there will be additional opportunities for things like VR and AR in terms of creating an additional line of revenue? So rather than it cannibalizing, borrowing audiences from one platform to the next, but something that actually brings new audiences in through that line of business. So for example, we're seeing with the Harry Potter franchise, we're seeing the Cursed Child theatre show adding an entirely new line of revenue that wasn't there before.
I think the answer is absolutely. Virtual reality is an absolutely incredible technology that ultimately is all about immersion, a new medium in which the public can completely immerse themselves in a story and get an experience that they can't get by simply watching a 2D screen. And as humans, I think we crave that immersion and we crave that escapism to some sense, and that's why we continue to go to the cinema, even though we have on-demand movies available at all times of the day. It's because we want that more immersive experience, and virtual reality is a technology that lands perfectly to fill that desire and need.
Okay. And
this is Jeff, and I just wanted to add to what Jeremy was saying. When I was younger, there was a Terminator pinball game in my arcade, and it ate up a whole lot of my quarters. and the Tron video game took up many of my dollars. So it stands to reason, I think, that VR and AR are going to leverage popular entertainment properties to get us to try them out.
do you know, I think that you're absolutely right, and I think it's not something that's going away. But what I am curious about is whether or not there will be a shift at some point soon where we see these not being led by movies. At the moment, a lot of these properties, a lot of these franchise universes that we're talking about, ultimately they're led by the movies. And I'm curious whether or not we think that there will be a shift at some point where actually it can be led by another medium, even if that is, for example, with the games industry. And we see things like, World of Warcraft, which is ultimately led by the game franchise rather than the movie. But I am curious whether or not you think that's going to become more of a trend or not. I throw that at you, Jeff.
Oh, sure. Well, listen, where did Hollywood come from? It came from New York, the home of publishing. And so even though they moved out west to take advantage of the sunshine, they never forgot the fact that books were going to be the primary source of many motion pictures. Relying on source material that is recognized by the public and adapting it is plenty of precedent for that. We're seeing 1 million comic book movies, and so the launch platform for the Marvel and DC cinematic universes are a little flimsy, colorful. So, and of course, there's Angry Birds from the Rovio app. I can't wait for VR to be the originator of a great intellectual property. A lot of what Starlight Runner does is assist companies, particularly interactive companies, with thinking about how to develop their intellectual properties from scratch in such a way that they are conducive to this adaptation. So we'll sit with Ubisoft and look at Splinter Cell or Assassin's Creed and talk about those worlds and how they might work best in a feature film. Same with Halo. Yeah, I it's to think about in that way.
Okay. So, Paul, I'm curious to hear from you then. In terms of, you're kind of at the beginning of this really interesting road that's laid before your feet, and you have yet to climb amongst the mountains. But you ultimately, you're going to be making choices in terms of platforms and in terms of formats that you're going to go with. And I am curious whether or not you see transmedia franchises as being a direction that you feel is right for your studio, in as much as is that a journey that you want to take with your audience, with your fandom?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, from the very get-go, I mean, we've been we've already identified transmedia and some of the newer media formats like virtual reality as areas that we want to play in. One of the things that gets us really excited about transmedia, and let's be honest, transmedia is a fancy word for something that's already been in existence forever,
for a long
right?
time. Yes.
Yeah, and books and movies and video games and all that stuff, I mean, they've all kind of coexisted, and the biggest brands have been across all of them. But one of the big differences that we see, just like you said, is it tends to be that one of the mediums is the sort of sole messaging vessel. And then once it's successful, then they monetize it in the other vehicles. Like, I mean, if we look at, for example, pinball machines way back when, essentially all the pinball machines were kind of the same. They just would be branded as Tron or branded as Addams Family or, whatever it was. And they'd make a few tweaks and do some of these things. One of the things that we get excited about, and, just to plug one of our partners, 42 Entertainment, they are one of our creative allies. And, I'd love to learn more about Starlight because, the way we look at our approach to this isn't oh, we've got a great media asset and now it's time to monetize it through these other mechanisms so we can make more money. I mean, that's obvious, and it's something that I think everybody needs to take into consideration in their building their model and, exacting a return on their investment. But where we get really excited is about how do these different mediums interplay and how can you build community around it? So, for example, when people go see a movie in a theater, you got a lightweight sort of community there in the room. But when people are solving a problem online that's been fed to them that's related to the movie that they're going to see or related to a movie they haven't ever heard of, that's what gets us excited. And so that there are these kind of different vessels that all kind of interconnect. So if you really truly want to experience the complete, storyline from this particular IP, that you would want to participate in all these things. And, like one of the examples that we talk about and that 42 Entertainment was involved with was the bridge that they created for the Batman franchise and leading up to the Dark Knight.
Why so serious?
Yeah, they did the Why So Serious campaign. And, at the peak of it, they had, I think, like 12 or 15 million people interacting and problem solving together online. And this was several years ago, before we were as socially connected as we are now.
Oh, it's at least 5 years ago. You're making me feel old now.
Yeah, and that's a community. You're building a community. And I think one of the things that the studios, they acknowledge that and they sort of look at it. But once the movie comes out, they move on from it. They're on to the next film. And that whole community just evaporates and it doesn't go anywhere. And so, we believe that with transmedia, you can create this ongoing experience that people can be attached to. You can extend the life beyond just the silver screen and have, all these other things, and you can build community around it. And, community is like our common denominator at Legion M. I mean, it's what we believe in.
Yeah.
But we have some ideas for IP that wouldn't be born out of a silver screen experience that's already been successful, but something that would culminate in a movie, but starts in a real life experience in a game, in a community, and you introduce other people and they get an invitation to participate, and then it keeps expanding. But ultimately, the goal is, as you're growing this entity and beginning to tell this story, that it culminates in a theater experience and in virtual reality experience in games and other things.
Okay, so here's the thing. When we talk about what Susan and the team at 42 have been doing, there are some people who might describe some of their activities more as ARG than necessarily as specific transmedia, because it's not about an individual, transmedia activity here. It's more about the arc of the gameplay, if you like. And Jeff, I'm curious to hear from you, your perspective on this in terms of the differences between what one might consider as transmedia versus what one might consider as ARG.
Well, certainly I consider projects like Why So Serious to be transmedia extensions of Warner Brothers' Batman franchise. But I do want to point out that it's tricky, because projects like that and what 42 did with Tron, I'm a big fan. I think they're amazing, but they appeal to a relatively rarefied audience. You have to make a serious commitment to these kind of game-like community building projects. You have to be smart. You're working on this. You're spending a healthy amount of time on it. And I happen to know a little inside baseball because I work with the studios. Warner Brothers looked at the result of Why So Serious, and while there was great press around it and so forth, the 10 or 12 or 14 million people for the money that project cost was the same amount that they could have spent on a TV commercial for Batman, The Dark Knight. And and they would have reached 10 times that number, on all the networks and so forth. So it's. I believe that's why we're not seeing the proliferation of alternate reality games and live events in tandem with big blockbuster franchise kind of rollouts. But I personally believe there's still, in some ways, a to play. The thing that Starlight Runner does with studios is that we arrive during the conceptual phase for these large franchises. So we're talking while the screenplay is being finalized, we're communicating with the producers, but also the studio heads, because the investments that are being made into these giant movies and these big TV series and major video games, it's so much money that you want to make sure that these intellectual properties last and last and last. So community building and communication with fandom and dialogue with fandom and the invitation of fan-generated creativity has to be infused into the project's development. We call this the architecture for dialogue, establishing how we're going to be communicating with fans and having fun with them on an ongoing basis. Is that something that 42 Entertainment can participate in? Absolutely. But here are all the different things that we're going to be doing over the course of the next several years, not just as a marketing element for a single movie.
Okay, so I think that one of the interesting aspects of the utilization of either ARG or transmedia when it comes to things like movies, it is considered very much as marketing. It is very much considered as a peripheral tool that is part of the PR and the marketing kit. And I am curious from your perspective, Sarah, because you've come from a background in TV, whether or not you feel that there is, perhaps a misconceived notion that actually these notions of things that create that community, things that create a bond beyond just the viewership for a TV show, that aren't perhaps being assigned proper value. And I think perhaps just following on from what Jeff was saying there, that one of the single biggest issues is the lack of assigned value to the outputs of something like an ARG. And I'm curious from your perspective and in your experience from a TV perspective, if you feel that perhaps that is part of the problem, is this lack of assigned value.
I think that's absolutely right. And I think the problem that we have is that it still is so dominant what's on TV, what's on in the cinema, that's still what's dominating all of the conversations, which is a real shame. This technology is far too good to waste as simply an add-on experience. I'm going back to what someone said before about having a VR experience that leads the way. There is Invasion, which is one of the most amazing VR creations that you can look on within app. And that's a brilliant short animation that's now being turned into a feature film. So that's just one example of where a VR short is now being developed and is leading the way. So I have to get that one in there. But certainly I don't know. I mean, I went to see the Suicide Squad. I know. But when I got home and then I saw that there was a Suicide Squad game on the Gear VR, and it was really good. I had it on my iPhone as well. It wasn't quite so good on my iPhone, but in the Gear headset, and I was running around with Harley Quinn, and it was fantastic. That could have been a very much a standalone game. It shouldn't just be this add-on experience. And I think it is changing people's mindsets. It's changing people's perspectives on what is the dominating media all the time. Certainly when we're making films at the moment, once I've got the smelly vision out of the way, the project that I'm working on, we've come at it as an approach where we have 5 different areas. As it is a full transmedia project. We've got all these different participatory opportunities and bringing in lots of different communities, so everything that we're talking about. But that's how it's designed from the very first moment that we've kind of conceptualized this idea. It's not we're making a film, and obviously that film's in VR because that's what I do, and now let's add on other things. It's certainly, this is the whole thing. And it just needs more people pushing that forward, seeing the there is so much importance in all of those areas. And I think it is simply, I mean, when I worked in TV, I quit 6 years ago, but then it was, this is TV, and now just file something for online. Now just add in some social media engagement, maybe record a different interview. And it was always the add-on. It was just to try and capture an audience's attention for a little bit longer. And I think we are seeing it shifting, but very, very slowly. And I think it was the chief guy at Netflix, he said about a month or so ago about VR. The VR isn't ever going to really be a standalone tool. It's only going to be on that add-on experience. And that was when they did the Stranger Things VR experience. It's a couple of minutes long or something. And I think that's really sad. This is a really powerful tool. It's an amazing technology that crosses into so many different sectors, and it does need to be given value, the same as all of these new emerging technologies. It's about finding the place and recognizing how valuable they are.
Okay, so I'm going to throw this out to you then, Jeremy, in terms of assigning value and understanding, how we can associate value to some of these perhaps less appreciated mediums.
Well, I'm just going to quickly latch on to what Sarah said there and add to it. I think you're absolutely right, Sarah, in the sense that VR can't just be an add-on. In fact, I think I'd go as far as to say that if virtual reality amounts to only an add-on in the future, then I think that will be a signal as to the death of the technology. It doesn't deserve to sit as an aside thought. It is powerful enough to stand on its own, and has a wide range of applications. If we're talking about value here, yes, for the video game market, about 50% of the revenue may come virtual reality. Video games will be 50%, but there are also massive commercial and corporate applications as well. We're talking about education, in healthcare, in the sports world, e-commerce even, and all of those sort of applications will make up the remaining 50%. So I absolutely think there is a lot of value in the VR world. Okay.
So I'm not going to suggest that we might have some evangelists for VR in this particular mix.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Never.
But I am curious to understand, from your different perspectives, what you think it is going to need to be that changes in the next 5 to 10 years, the most significant change that you think needs to occur, be that a technological change or a cultural shift. What is it that's going to completely change the way that you do business? And I am curious to hear from you, Jeff, what you think that will be.
Are we on VR or something else?
For you in your business, so from a Starlight Runner perspective, what do you think needs to happen, needs to shift in order for your business to kind of leap forward and have that monumental leap that needs to happen?
I think it's in the process of happening. I think that the two things that we face and they are interlinked is the fact that good storytelling is absolutely essential, no matter what it is that you're doing, if it involves communication to large numbers of people. We're seeing better storytelling in the video game industry now. We're seeing better, more responsible storytelling in some of the bigger brands that are out there. They just need to respect the writer. They can't have the guy from down in engineering writing the story for you necessarily. The other thing is that I think is really exciting is that better and better tools are being developed to help fans express themselves, to help people who are kind of not in the entertainment industry, the consumer, to communicate with greater emotional resonance and greater professionality. We're seeing programs that help you write better. We're seeing apps that make it look like you've got your own production studio that could actually light you and put makeup on you and throw on background music that sounds professional for once. These sorts of things are happening, which is going to make user-generated content, fan content, and original content developed by consumer really, really remarkable, better and better. And that's great because it will allow for professionally created content to intermingle and mix and maybe even blend with fan or consumer content, then, that's a whole new world, and it's a world I'm really excited about.
Okay. And so while we're talking about this, I'm just going to pick up on one of your points, which is about the idea of the writer needing to be respected and not necessarily dragging, in the engineer in the engine room to necessarily do the writing for you. And so since she was one of our founding participants, I'm going to mention the VR Writers Room. Shameless plug. But I do think that these kind of conversations are incredibly important, and actually bringing together writers from across different industries to talk about what the future of narrative design will be for VR is one of the most valuable conversations that we can have. So I'm just throwing that in there. Go check it out. We'll put a link into the notes. But Sarah, I am curious to hear from you what you think needs to happen in order to completely change the way that you currently do business.
I've got to say something different now, don't I, than last time. So I'm going to go with social VR, because I'm obviously thinking about this a lot at the moment with Zuckerberg's demo of social VR as a platform. And I get really uneasy with social experiences in virtual reality. And I know that it needs to happen for me to advance storytelling in that area and engagement and getting away from that isolated virtual experience. But I still feel really awkward if I jump into a space in Old Space or in V-Time or in one of those, and I just feel really weird when people just come up to me and people are really pervy, and it's just not an experience. So I don't know why. It's just odd. So for me, I think being able to have that natural virtual community where it is really real and exciting, and you can move around and make loads of decisions within a virtual world with people and engage with them in a way that you can't always do. And Zuckerberg's demo was amazing. I just don't want to feel awkward in those spaces. And I think once we get over that shift, and for me, when VR becomes a lot more sociable, you get away from that appointment to view virtual experience, or drilling into the room for the vibe, being by yourself and all that kind of thing. And I think that'll be a massive game changer to have multiple participants within your own virtual world. I have really cool.
I have to say, I think this is quite interesting, because one of my kind of recent kind of conversations and thoughts on this was this idea that actually we can have these social VR environments where we've got lots of people all kind of milling about and communicating, like Alt VR as a for example. And my experiences with Alt VR have been somewhat awkward, in as much as you kind of step into a room and you have no idea, who somebody is and what you're supposed to be talking about and why they're moving in an odd way.
And creepy. People are creepy.
But it's like, do you have a VR headset? Are you using a HTC? Are you using a Gear? Are you just on your PC? Because that changes the way that you're going to communicate with me and interact with me, because you're more limited if you don't have a HTC and you can move your hands around, or, whatever it may be. So you've got this, awkward, avatar that just doesn't move very much because the person's only on their PC, or you've got this really, fluid avatar because actually they're in HTC Vive. And actually, I wonder if there needs to be a democratization of the way that people are projected and can interact within these social spaces first, to kind of remove that almost, it feels
weirdness.
It's just like the level of your participation depends entirely on what you own. I think that would be interesting to see that removed.
Yeah, I do also like having my own space in VR. So when things get a little bit awful in the office, then I do tend to lie on the floor and go to a beach. And I like not being bothered. So as much as I want the advances for social VR, I quite like being that awkward person lying on the floor in a headset myself.
Okay, so I'm curious to hear from you, Paul, what you think would be the big thing that needs to change for you in order to completely change the way that you do business, even though you're still at the very early stages of your journey.
Yeah. No, I think, for us, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, we're almost, single-minded in our approach, that for us, we really want the entertainment industry as a whole to take more chances and to get behind more unique and interesting projects rather than just retreading the same old things. And, one of the challenges, of course, and the thing that we're addressing is that most of the entertainment industry is owned by Wall Street, and they're bottom line focused, and it's all about making money. And for us, obviously, we're taking investment from fans, so we also want to monetize the content, but we want to add value. We want to be able to empower creators to create new projects and not just assign a very talented person to someone else's project and have them redo it again, or have them, respin it for VR as a game or something like that. I mean, we really want, the industry as a whole to start creating, new projects. And I think you'll see some creative stuff from us this year. I think, there are, moments of brilliance that come out of Hollywood, but I think most people would agree that too much of what occupies the mainstream viewing experience isn't new and innovative. It's just purely monetization. And sometimes it's good. Like I'm not complaining about all the new Star Wars movies. Those are fine. I'm supportive of that. But we just want to see as much energy and passion being put behind, the next Star Wars universe. What is it? And it's not branded as Star Wars, and it's totally different and unique. Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, we really want, the community to get more involved and to empower creators to innovate again.
Okay. So no, you don't want any more a Star Wars tale. You want it to be completely new.
Well, no, I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I mean, we're not sort of overly negative about what is going on. We just feel like there's a lot of room there's so much creativity out there, and there's so many amazing creators and creative projects that aren't getting the sort of mainstream spotlight because they're not an existing franchise.
Yeah.
And if you look at the major studios, they have very little patience or risk tolerance for anything that's not already a proven franchise. And if you look at the trend and the direction, that's kind of scary. I mean, imagine 10 years from now where there literally is no new stuff. It's just there's a new Star Wars movie, there's a new this and that, and we're just respinning stuff from the 80s still.
Do you know, I did see somebody post a Facebook post today that said something to the effect of, in the future, all we'll ever see is every news story will be told in either the Star Wars, the DC, or the Harry Potter universe.
Exactly.
If they don't happen in those three universes, they don't exist.
And then it won't happen. Yeah. And anyone with anything original that wants to get it done will be told, oh yeah, we like this story. This is a good story. Can you tell it with, in the Star Wars universe? And then, that'll be how to bring it to market.
Okay. So Jeremy, what about you? What do you think is going to be that significant change that needs to happen for you?
So if I look at PwC, for example, we've got over 220,000 people worldwide, but this could apply to any large corporation or multinational company. It's fair to say that there are a fair amount of meetings that take place between countries, within countries, but requiring journeys. Now, ultimately, apart from the push for sustainability in society and the obvious benefit that brings, we've tried to bridge that gap with a number of different solutions like Skype, like Google Hangouts. But ultimately, what I see in the future as being truly disruptive is if we look at that from a virtual reality lens, and we consider on the social VR point that Sarah mentioned and brought up, in the future, can we avoid having to make these journeys by simply meeting in a virtual reality boardroom or auditorium or whatever that may be, with perhaps lifelike avatars to help create that sense of, yes, this is as close as possible to a real face-to-face meeting, and there is no need for us to take that flight anymore from New York to London or Shanghai to Dubai or whatever it may be. So I think that idea is going to be truly disruptive for a number of different companies all over the world.
Indeed. I hear the quiet cries of all those people who would love to continue travelling, who won't get the option anymore. But on the plus side, it does mean that for those who can't afford to travel, perhaps there will be an option in the future that allows them to explore without ever having to leave their own home. But to bring it back to the movie industry, I am quite looking forward to the stage where we can just hire an actor who works from their home and they have their green screen background, but they also have their digital, motion capture suits and whatnot, so that we can just literally record them at a distance and they can be inserted into our various movies and other projects. I'm quite looking forward to that day when we don't even have to have them in the studio with us. Okay. But what I am going to ask you, because our lovely listeners do like to find out more about what you're up to and follow you, is to share with us your social media handle of choice. And I will start with you, Jeremy.
Sure. So I'd say Twitter is probably the most useful one. Mm-hmm. And you can follow me there for all VR, AR news. And I'm Jeremy C. Dalton.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Jeff, what about you?
You can follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Gomez, Jeff_GOMEZ. You can also hit Starlight Runner or Jeff Gomez on Facebook.
And we mustn't forget the underscore, because the other Jeff Gomez does not appreciate it when people follow him randomly.
He's really sore at me.
And Paul, what about you?
Yeah, I think because we're so community oriented, I would point you to our Legion M Facebook page. I mean, that's probably the best place to find us.
Wonderful. And Sarah?
Okay, I'm on Twitter all the time at Virtual Sarah J. And as of today, I think we just launched Perspectives VR, which is housing all of our smelly films. So at Perspectives VR as well.
Okay, check out the smelly films, people.
If only smells could go through Twitter, then we'd be all right.
Well, I want to thank you all for joining us today, and thank you for listening. If you enjoy this content, don't forget to subscribe and review, and follow us on Twitter at Digital Jam Ltd.
digitaljamsessions.com